Gotta turn off the sound everywhere, or there's gonna be horrible. All right, so it's hello, play for all. Live event will start in a few minutes. It says we're live, but it's not broadcasting. It's not broadcasting. Oh, all right. So that's good.
Should I press play?
It shouldn't really matter for you. Catherine, play for all. I'm not sure is getting. Everybody, are we live here? We having any luck? Okay, great. Maybe can a few more folks sort of give me a yes that you've successfully managed to see us broadcasting? I get a yes if you can see me broadcasting, and a no if you can't. Lee, maybe you should try refreshing. Lee is having a hard time with the internet today, but it's not his fault.
Mm-hmm.
We can get everybody on here.
It's funny, I can hear the delay. So it's like funny time travel.
Yep. That is the kind of weirdness of this system. Here, you can all look at me now for a little bit. Yes, the sound does lag behind the text. You are all. We're gonna live in an alternate universe where we're going to live in an alternate universe where you're all a few minutes or 45 seconds behind me, which will be a little bit weird, but we'll get used to it relatively quickly. I don't know what a good sort of equivalent thing would be. But it looks like we have everyone up and running now, which is very exciting. So thanks you for your patience as you get going. We're incredibly lucky today to have Rick Rose from the Media Lab, the Lifelong Kindergarten Group, and now headed to UC Boulder to be a professor in, I think, all of the schools there, in the Media Communications and Information School, maybe in the Education School too, a bunch of these kinds of things. We can see you all and we'll be tracking the chat room. So as people have questions or thoughts or insights, I think it would be great to have a back channel that's going along there while we're talking. Our goal today is to try to explore the internet, the intersection between free and open online resources and online resources and equity. And Rick Rose has done some terrific work in that area. It's something that I'm super passionate about as well. And so hopefully the way we'll run class today is that we'll have Rick Rose give us a kind of shared text to work from. She'll give us a little talk over the first 20 minutes or so of class, and I'll fill in some things with there. And then hopefully people noticed in the bottom left-hand corner there bunch of breakout rooms where we can continue the discussion on things that are of interest to us. Rick Rose is just going to sort of look at her screen and talk over her slides, and I'll be the one that's sort of monitoring the chat, but she's enthusiastic about taking questions as she goes along. So please do use them there. I guess the other thing that we're doing today is we're just experimenting with on Hangout. It's a platform that I've had a lot of fun with. It's both, I think, facilitated some really great conversations and also made me think about what we can do with technology and synchronous online learning and some of those kinds of things. At the end of class, Catherine, who's one of the leads on the Hangout team and obviously also a member of our class, will take the last chunk of time to have us have a conversation about that. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Rika Rose, who can introduce yourself more completely and then share some of the work that you've been doing with family creative learning.
Great, it's really nice to be here and share some of my work, and I'm also really happy to have a discussion, and I always look forward to people's questions. I'm a PhD student now at the Lifelong Kindergarten Group at the MIT Media Lab, and as Justin said, I'll be heading over to Boulder in the fall as a professor. I'm going to share my work with family creative learning, and I'll share it kind of in 3 parts. Share a bit more about the context and the motivation and some of the design work that I've been doing, and also share a story of one family's experience through it with some reflections at the end. Feel free to ask me, again, any questions throughout. I won't be able to see the chat window, so I've asked Justin to interrupt me with any questions. So I think I'll just share my screen. Okay. I think screen has been shared. Do you see it, Justin?
I do.
Okay.
And then, yep, and I think it's broadcasting successfully.
All right. So, I'll just jump right in. So what I'm going to talk about today, actually thinking about the course called Massive. The work I'm going to show today is actually very small, and the process has been slow, and as far as place, it's been really hyper-local, and for analysis, it's been very qualitative. So I just wanted to kind of position it a little bit in that way, and I did that very intentionally when I started working on this project, is I wanted to kind of take a moment to do something small and slow and hyperlocal and take a very qualitative approach with it. So my background, I've had maybe about 10 years now, I've been working on different tools that allow people to create and express themselves with technology. And for the last 5 years, I've been helping conduct research in the Scratch project, which is a programming language for kids. And at the same time, I've been doing different kinds of outreach with youth to engage them in these kinds of technologies that help them express themselves with technology, and also working with educators and thinking about how they might bring it to their settings both in and out of school. So as I mentioned before, I've been working on the Scratch project for the last 5 years, and I was really fascinated with especially its online community. Having worked on other programming languages for kids, and I really wanted to know what was it like to contribute and help with the design of a project that was reaching millions of kids worldwide. And we recently passed the 14 million project mark, I think. It's been growing pretty exponentially, and Scratch has been around since 2007, and it's been translated in over 50 languages. The online community is really dynamic and has all kinds of participation that continue to surprise the team in the kinds of things that people create, but also the kinds of things that they do together. And in a lot of interviews with Scratchers that I talked to, you could really get the sense that that they were these kind of computational creators, people who were really able to use computing to create things they care about, develop identities as creators, and see the ways that they can shape the world. And that's really exciting, that they can see technology as this tool to imagine the creative possibilities for themselves and their community. And that's what I want for young people to take with technology. And I know others in my group who also believe in that. But one thing that I was also noticing and talking to a lot of youth who use Scratch very actively and have been using it for many years is that their parents are playing many roles in the background. It was really interesting. Parents might have introduced them to Scratch, or like the parent might have worked on projects with them, or just even acting as an authentic community audience member for their work where they could ask questions. Parents might even point them to other opportunities to deepen their interests. This really runs counter to this narrative of a digital native that, if you kind of leave children on their own with technology, that they're going to be able to take up all the opportunities with it. So I became really fascinated with the roles that parents were playing, and other research has been documenting that as well, kind of identifying the different roles that parents play. But there's another but. A lot of the parents that were supporting them often had technology backgrounds or engineering backgrounds, so they already had kind of a history and practice around technology that could help them appreciate and share this kind of world, this computational culture with their children. And this phrase used by Jane Margolis and her colleagues of this preparatory privilege, that a lot of youth who were taking up these really creative opportunities with technology had a lot of technical and economic resources, had a lot of autonomy over their technology use, and social support from important people around them, like their parents. And again, often people think that if you just provide access to technology, that they'll be able to have all these benefits and advantages, but really there's also other factors at play, and access is not just enough. That using it, a lot of people often use technology, but how are they taking up these really creative and design-based opportunities with it? So I became really interested in, what do we need to think about to engage people who may not have these opportunities or these kind of opportunities in their network. And one question that Seymour Papert asked in a book that he wrote called Mindstorms that really helped to motivate me was this question of which people will be attracted to the world of computers, what talents will they bring, what tastes and ideologies will they impose on the growing computer culture. And for me, my takeaway from that is that, we're all really, we all need to take part in helping shape the kind of computational society that we live in. And in order to help make sure that that's inclusive, we need to invite people of many different backgrounds. And in the last few years, I'm sure some of you have noticed that there's been this really great energy to engage people in, in certain forms of computational creation, such as coding. There's like the Hour of Code that happens at the end of the year during Computer Science Education Week. President Obama just pledged $4 billion to support computer science education in schools. There's all these out-of-school opportunities as well. Different kind of like Girls Who Code, Code Club. That's a pretty international network of clubs. So there's all this energy to think about how might we design opportunities for people, especially those who are underrepresented. And I've also been thinking a lot about what kinds of structures might we design to support people to engage in computational creation. And a lot of these structures often go along the lines of thinking about tools, the kinds of activities, and the people who are involved to support it, and the kind of environment that both physical and social emotional. And that's kind of what I mean by that, and looking at what tools are available. So as I was mentioning before, like Scratch has been really great, and tools like it to make programming more accessible, for example. So rather than using syntax that might deter people initially, there have been a lot of tools that have made it easier. Kind of pushing that a little further, one thing that I appreciate about some of the tools that have emerged is how easy it is, how expressive they are. So how easy it is to kind of take ideas and translate them into a project, and also how. Oh, did someone ask a question?
Yes. Well, there's two. When you sharing your screen, we're just seeing like the icon of your face rather than your slides. Did you share one or did you share entire screen? I mean, not that there's no slides that are advancing anyway, as far as I can tell, but or have you got through slides? No.
I haven't going through slides.
Oh, we missed them then. That was my fault. I told everyone that I would go by.
Let's see.
Now I can see the tool slide. Okay, that's good.
Let's try
now
again.
I can see you.
Entire screen. Maybe I did accidentally just click it. Whoa. Okay.
Here you are. Ah, there's all of us.
I know. Can you see the slides now?
I think we're good. All right. Actually, now is when people are going to go through the Twilight Zone.
It's a continuing theme of the Twilight Zone.
Yep, it's good. And then here's a question, which is Chris, which is one response to your sort of observation about where people get supports is there a bunch of folks, people like Nicholas Negroponte and Sugata Mitra, who have sort of said like, look, what kids really need are kids need to be able to be sort of left alone. And, kids are able to learn independently. I don't know, how do you think about those ideas in reaction to sort of your interest in engaging families? Like, the argument is just access is enough, that adults can get into kids.
Yeah, and I have to say that, I have a computer science background, and I'm a pretty self-motivated learner. And, I had that idea as well, that like, let's just get out of kids' ways. And there's a lot of titles. I recently saw an op-ed at the New York Times that said to enable like creative kids to grow, step back, like stay out of their way. And in some ways, I really believe in children's abilities to take up opportunities and really roll with it and learn through experience. But I think it's naive to kind of just focus on that when you take a step back, you see that the environment and the tools that they're using really play an important role. And even just this, when I talk to a lot of Scratchers, and that's what really helped me understand, is that they did have a lot of that like creative agency, but you could see the roles that their parents were playing in the background, whether it was very explicit, like introducing them to Scratch, or creating an environment where they felt safe to take creative risk, to take things apart and not feel like they would get punished. And I think in some ways that it can be really dangerous to have that mentality if we just kind of leave kids alone, because the environment is really playing a large role in their participation. And there are a lot of studies that I can share that highlight the ways that their environment and the people and the kinds of opportunities that are available to them really influence the trajectories that they take.
Awesome. Thank you. I think we're all set up again.
Okay.
We can hear you, we can see you. We're good.
Cool. So, so as I was mentioning, like a lot of the kind of different interventions that try to engage people as computational creators think about just like what kinds of tools, activities, and people in the environment support people in this activity. And as I was mentioning, like there's a lot of tools that have made it a lot more accessible to get started with creating things using computer programming. And there's also been a lot of tools that made it easy to make all kinds of things. You know, there's some tools that are very narrow that really just focus on one thing, which is also fine if you're really interested in games, for example. But if you want to make dance projects, I'm also really interested in tools that make it easy to express different kinds of projects. Activities are also one form that people try to engage people in. I think when I started to learn how to program, most of the activities in my AP computer science class was focused on sorting numbers and creating calculators. And it's moved a lot further than that. There's like robotics competitions, there's gaming competitions, but I'm also really interested in activities that engage and connect across different interests. So if someone's really interested, as I was mentioning before, in dance, or someone's really interested in music, how can we support a variety of interests through the kinds of activities we design? And also kind of rethinking the role of different people in the environment. I think there's, people often think about the central instructor, but what role do people play as facilitators and as co-learners and peer learners, rather than thinking of this central instructor or central expert in the room? And also thinking about the environment. And there's so many ways that the physical environment can signal if someone's welcome or unwelcome. I mean, just kind of stepping into a room and you see, for example, all kinds of posters about space, you know, and if you're excited about space, you feel like you already belong. But if you're not, you start to question that. And so I'm also really interested in how people have designed physical spaces to support people. So jumping into my project, Family Creative Learning, I was really fascinated with the role that parents and families are playing to support their children and engaging in these kinds of interests. But what about parents who may not have backgrounds in technology, but are highly motivated to support their children? I started working with different community centers that serve low-income families who are already providing services for their communities, such as after-school programming for kids or parent support services. And that consists of working with like Boys and Girls Clubs or community centers and housing developments. And we did an iterative process across a few years working together to design this program. And one of the things, well, maybe I'll skip these slides. Maybe I'll just mention it, is that just kind of looking at prior studies on how families are using technology together or at home. One challenge that, especially for families that may not have backgrounds in technology, is just what kinds of perceptions they have for the purpose of computing. Like they see it as something is beneficial for their kids, but what is it really used for? And often some parents might constrain it only for school uses and not so much more informal uses that could lead to other interests and learning opportunities. Roles in families are also getting really complicated. So often a lot of kids are the kind of technology broker. They're the ones supporting their parents to use the technology. And again, you could use that as an argument for like, well, so that's why we should leave kids alone, and they're already taking up a lot of these opportunities. But often for a lot of youth, and in studies of kids as technology brokers, they found that a lot of young people's expertise with technology is really tied to their immediate networks, so peers or school. And if they attend a school that doesn't have, that is very curriculum poor around computing, it can really limit the potential of their expertise over time. So looking at what opportunity,
I just want to say that that comment that you made just there is a little bit different from the comment that you made before about sort of warning us about, earlier you sort of warned us, the kids are not digital natives necessarily. Mm-hmm. But this slide here, sort of has a little bit more like, or this argument you're making here is like kids do sort of sometimes have a special role in families as, digital natives helping digital immigrant parents in the same, in the same way, almost like sort of, traditional first generation students have been cultural brokers for their parents
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
and it's true. I think and kids are playing those roles for their families. They might be someone to look things up or look up directions for something or help fill out forms online. But as I was saying before, that people who have studied kids as cultural brokers and technology brokers, that it puts a lot of responsibility on the kids. And sometimes it could undermine what decisions they might make or other opportunities that they're able to take up as they kind of continue to support their family. And also that they found that a lot of kids' kind of development of that expertise still relied on their immediate network. So they were learning from their peers or picking up things from school. So there were still limitations to kind of leaving kids on their own to take up and learn about technology. If their immediate network, for example, in school, a lot of schools they might focus more on basic literacy with computing, less so thinking about ways to be creative with computing.
cool.
Um, and speaking of kind of basic kind of computer uses, there are some programs that have been engaging families in these kind of intergenerational learning opportunities. For example, one based here in Boston called Techo's Home. I really love their model of inviting whole families to learn how to use the computer together, and they invite teachers to support them in that. And they get to know the teachers, they get to know the computers, and at the end they have a subsidized computer that they can take home with them. But I think that's an important, but it's still a first step towards thinking about computational creation. And but I was really inspired by these kinds of programs for families that treated them as co-learners. And just as another side note, an approach that I was really influenced by in thinking about this program was constructionism. And it's a framework proposed by Seymour Papert. And it argues that people learn best when they're designing things that are personally and socially meaningful to them. And it builds on John Piaget's kind of theories of learning, that people build knowledge through experience and not kind of acquiring or through transmission. And so in the workshops with families, we engage them in building projects. We encourage them to bring in their own interests and funds of knowledge into their activity and the projects that they make. And we really encourage them to work together, but also to connect and work with the other families in the room. So the program as it is now, it's a series of 5 workshops, and we do it once a week for 2 hours, and it's held in the community center, and we recruit families from the neighborhood. They learn how to use the Scratch programming language and the Makey Makey invention kit, and they work on a family project that they share in a community showcase at the very end where they can invite other friends and family. Again, I'll just briefly go through the design. And I want you to think about it again across these 4 dimensions of thinking about the tools, activities, and the people and the environment. As I mentioned before, we use the Scratch programming language. One thing that we found, it was really easy for someone to dominate the computer. And we introduced a physical component through the Makey Makey invention kit. You can create a physical interface to the computer using everyday conductive materials. And it allowed families to create physical and digital projects and also create multiple entry points for them. So if someone was more interested in the physical aspects of it, they can work on that while someone works on the kind of digital aspects of it. The activity structure consisted of this 4-part structure that we called Eat, Meet, Make, Share. We always started with dinner, and it was a great opportunity also for families to start with something that they're familiar with, which is eating together. I think it's providing food is really essential for parents who are really busy and families that have all kinds of schedules, and it's a great way to communicate that you care about them. I found that food is a non-negotiable in this program. We separate the parents and the kids briefly to check in with their peers and if they have any questions, and we especially try to encourage the parents to connect and be there to support one another in this experience. The bulk of the workshop is spent making, using Scratch and Miki Miki, and we always end in a share. So they talk about the experience in their own words, and they can get recognition and get feedback on their projects. Again, thinking about facilitation was a really important part of creating a safe and welcoming space for people, but also thinking about our role as co-learners and co-creators with the families. I often recruited students from local universities, and it was a great learning experience for them too, to understand how to be someone more in the background, supporting them, less so someone being an instructor. We tried to design the physical environment as something that felt communal and collaborative, and often a lot of computing rooms are designed where it's like rows of computer facing one direction, and sometimes the tables are even bolted to the floor. So we tried to configure the room in a way that could communicate that this was a collaborative space. And we also tried to create a social emotional space where people felt like they could take creative risks. And so we would always, at the start of the program, create a community code where we asked kids and parents what they needed to feel creative or to feel respected in a room. So that's kind of the overall design of the program. I was going to briefly go into sharing a family's experience, but I wondered if people wanted to check in with any questions, or maybe I should pause there in case I've been speaking for too long.
Yeah, we can give folks a second just to see if they have any questions. And Saskia is asking the question, how do you get parent buy-in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say recruiting is one of the challenging aspects of the program. We work with the community center staff who really know the families. And one of the things that we do first actually is to get buy-in from the kids and help them understand what the program is, get them jazzed about it so that they can be advocates for their parents and help the parents understand what this is and what this means to the kids. Sometimes parents come because they're like, my kid told me to come. For parents, we try to explain it as this family time where they can learn together. And we find that connects a lot with values of kind of family bonds and relationships. One thing that we also encourage a lot of the people who are doing the recruitment, why we need the community center, is they already have those existing relationships with families. And so having someone just say to them that like, this will be really good for you is helpful enough for parents to participate. And I find also previous parents are really great advocates for the program. So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach that we take because this is so unusual and it is a series of workshops rather than a kind of a one-time activity.
Yeah, so it sounds like you need to depend upon existing social networks. That it would be harder to do something like this in like a room that pop-up storefront that you rented or something like that, like Boys and Girls Club space. You're using it to network, and then you're sort of leveraging that ongoing. Allison asked a question about the community code there. I guess to clarify, this is a code that sort of gets reinvented in every workshop, but she was wondering what it meant to need a moment, or what a moment was.
Yeah. I think that we notice that sometimes people come in having a bad day, or they get really excited or very passionate about something and have a disagreement with someone. And so we really want to give people permission, almost that like if they need a moment, that they can take it. They don't always have to be doing what everyone else is doing.
Jordan asked a question, so, and this resonates with my experience, that places like the Boys and Girls Club, his question is, In my model of the world, community centers and boys and clubs are frankly places where parents send their kids to get them out of the house or to provide some after school care support. So I'm wondering if that was sort of a norm that you were pushing against.
Yeah, we definitely had to push against that. This like the drop off mentality. And that was also a really important part of recruitment, is really communicating the level of commitment from parents. And the first workshop is so essential in I think retaining families, that we really make sure that the first workshop feels right in terms of connecting to people and their goals and showing that this can be a valuable experience for their family. But yeah, we do run into that, and recruitment and the first workshop are essential to communicate that this is a commitment for parents too.
And then Martin asked a great question. I mean, a big part of this is sort of about expanding access and the challenge of expanding access to people in different circumstances. And, his comment is to get parent buy-in when the single parent is working multiple jobs just to keep the heat on and the food on the table and those kinds of things. I wonder what your sense of how those kinds of things sort of did recruit your, sort of how you felt about success in reaching a really wide diversity of people through these workshops.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's true, a lot of the families that we work with, and also the families in the community that we do these workshops in, have all kinds of challenges that they encounter throughout the day. And, in some ways it's a luxury to be able to be done with work by 5, so you could come to the workshop and know what your schedule is going to be week to week. And we definitely ran into that challenge with some parents. And in some ways you could say that the way the program is structured, it doesn't support families or parents who can't have a regular schedule. And that's something that we recognize. But I also think given knowing what those constraints are, we are still able to connect with different families in the community. And I think that's why making that case that this is valuable family time, because they do that in other kinds of activities, for example, going to church or attending sporting events, that there are these other natural places in their lives where they come together around something. And we really wanted to make the case that doing these creative activities together as a family is something worth coming around together once a week for a few weeks.
That's great. Very cool. All right, I think you've satiated the questions for now. So we'd love to hear the other stories that you have.
Okay, so I just wanted to conclude by sharing what a family's experience looks like. And my dissertation focuses more at looking at families' experiences and what they are kind of getting out of this experience. And this is where kind of the qualitative aspect of the project comes in. I really wanted to understand, just because I haven't really seen other projects do this before with families, like what are the things that families might be experiencing that in this kind of environment. So I'm going to share a case study of Julia and Eric. So Julia is a stay-at-home mom. She immigrated from Panama when she was a teenager, and she had just taken a Tech Goes Home class at the community center. So she created her own email address. She learned how to use PowerPoint, and she made a PowerPoint presentation as her final project, and they got a subsidized computer that she was able to take home and share with Eric, who's 10 years old, and he's really shy. You have to lean in sometimes to hear him speak. And but he really likes to build things, and whether it's like physical materials like Lego or cardboard. With their new computer, he learned about Google SketchUp and has been exploring that. So they learned about the workshop through one of the community center staff, who talked to Julia and said that, this is something that you two should try, because Eric, I heard that he's interested in engineering, Eric had heard about engineering in school, and so Julia, wanted to be supportive and had just taken this Tech Goes Home experience and thought, okay, let's do it together. So that first night, everyone in the room, we asked them to use Scratch and to create an animated project of their name. So taking each of their initials and doing something wacky with it. And that first night, they were both really nervous. Julie had just taken this basic computer literacy course. Eric had heard about programming, but he wasn't sure if he could do it. So they were both really nervous. But at the end of the night, Eric was really impressed that his mom made something. And his mom was really impressed that not only that what Eric made was so creative, but it was also so personal. He imported an image from a screenshot of Minecraft, and he had just been talking to her about it. So she was really impressed that he incorporated something that was personal to him. The second night, they were introduced to Makey Makey. Eric was kind of nervous, excited. He didn't know that you could program things in the physical world and connect the computer and the physical world like that. Julia was nervous. She heard something about electricity and conductivity, and she was like, am I gonna get electrocuted by this? And she was able to laugh it off with another parent. These first 2 nights, actually, parents and kids work separately with their peers. So that way the parents and the kids can each get their hands on the tools and not worry about each other. The next night, they started working together on a family project, and the group decided to work on kind of like a carnival theme across everyone's projects. So they thought, let's do a roller coaster. We were just in Revere and saw this, mini roller coaster thing. Maybe we could do something like that. And they started working with a facilitator who helped translate their ideas to using Scratch and Makey Makey. And they took turns, each one working on a different roller coaster car. Eric was more of a creative director, helping make decisions. And Julia was kind of this like project manager, making sure that they were on time, calling a facilitator if they needed help, and helping to troubleshoot, if they forgot to plug in something, for example. Their final project, they showed it at the community showcase, was again like this roller coaster where if you move these aluminum foil plates to the front, it triggers an animation in Scratch to play of like a roller coaster car moving across a screen and someone's voice screaming, which they had recorded in the workshop. And so it's the community showcase. Eric was still really shy. Julia brought people in to introduce them to the project, and she asked Eric to explain. And Eric's principal was there because their school is just across the street, and he was really surprised to see Eric talking, because again, Eric is very shy. So when I asked Julia and Eric about their experience in the workshop, kind of what they were taking away from it, Julia talks about the experience to come in and learn with other people, to build something from nothing and create something out of nothing. That I'm going to keep for myself as an experience forever. So as I mentioned before, Julia came in to be supportive to Eric and this interest that he had in engineering. But Julia got an experience seeing something about herself, that she could create something out of nothing. When I asked Eric what he was taking away from the experience, he said, I was able to express what I did without having to keep it to myself. And when I asked him how, how did that happen? He said, when everyone else was presenting what they did, it made me want to feel the same way. So as I mentioned before, everyone shares at the end of the workshop, and kind of seeing others do it, Eric wanted to kind of experience that himself as well, to be able to share his ideas. When I asked him about the experience of working together and seeing each other in this space, Julia said, I know that he knows a lot of things, but he's very quiet and he wouldn't say a lot of things. But in this experience, in this environment, he was able to open up and show what he knows. That was the thing that blew me away. And when I asked Eric, what was it like to see his mom in this space? He said, so I asked, what surprised you about your mom? And she invented things. And this word invented is really important to Eric, because throughout the interview, he talks about how he likes inventing things, how he wants to be an inventor. And he uses this word to describe what she does. So Eric and Julie's experience is just one of the families that come through the workshops, and not everyone comes as a pair. Some families come in threes, or some come as a group of 6. So we welcome the whole family to come. Not everyone works so seamlessly as Eric and Julia. Some communicate by shouting at each other. And in some instances, we encourage families to just work on their own project, but work next to each other. They also take on different roles. As I was mentioned before, Eric was this creative director and Julia was the project manager. For some families, it's their first time really collaborating on a project together. So there's kind of these different dynamics that happen across the workshops. And what's really fascinating is watching the kinds of roles that they take on throughout the experience to support one another in working on projects together. One of the, just some common themes across their experience is what's been really fascinating to me is seeing their shift in perspectives on how they see themselves and each other as computational creators. So for example, a lot of parents often come into the experience saying how illiterate they are with technology, but coming out of the experience instead thinking like, oh, well, I guess I can learn new things, or that I can be creative if I just try. And they also have these certain perspectives on their kids are, you know, I think they're really addicted to technology, or they keep playing this game. I don't know if they're really getting something out of it. So it's this opportunity to kind of see each other in these different ways. And they also have expanding perspectives on computing and what they can do with it. For many kids and parents, it's their first time programming, and to be able to see that the computer is something that you just tell it what to do, and that's what programming is. Or that, as one kid said, that I didn't know you could connect a computer to the open world. So it's really kind of expanding this idea that the computer is this black box to something that they can control and be creative with. And for me, what's been interesting in this experience is, you know, seeing those perspectives on themselves, each other, and computing, and how those perspectives relate to their developing identities as computational creators, and how, you know, those perspectives on themselves and each other have potential to really influence the decisions, for example, parents make about what opportunities are meaningful for their kids, what resources they might provide, or to help them interpret opportunities as they see them. And for many kids and parents to be able to see each other as playful inventors with technology, which is something that they might not be able to see in other contexts. And I really connect with this quote from Paulo Freire about that, you know, through learning they can make and remake themselves. That, you know, through an experience where they're making things, they're trying things out, and they're learning together, that they have opportunities to kind of see themselves in a different way and be an active participant in shaping that in their experience. I just want to end again by mentioning, you know, that President Obama is doing this really exciting thing of investing and trying to encourage people to invest in computer science education. And I think that's a really great and important step. When you look at the details, though, a lot of it is often focused on school-based opportunities, which again, I believe is a really important context. But in working with families and working with community centers, there's also this really important kind of larger learning ecology that supports young people in their trajectories. You know, they have their school experiences, but also their peers and their families and all the other contexts of their lives. And so when thinking about how we support someone's interests in learning, we also need to think broader. And the family and the community are really rich contexts for thinking about how we can do that, especially when thinking about youth who often might not be active participants or really underrepresented in these kinds of activities. You know, Seymour Papert, who's been really influential in a lot of the work that I do and others in my research group, you know, Mindstorms has been one book that I've read a few times. There's a line that he says there, you know, and when he says like, this book is about how computers can be carriers of powerful ideas and seeds of cultural change. And I think sometimes people take that a little too literally, really focusing on the tools and having, as Seymour said, like this technocentrism, thinking that technology is the thing that will lift all boats and that we just need to provide people access to it. But Amy Breckman, who also is of that lineage of constructionist approaches, kind of counters that message. And it's really, as she said, that people must be the carrier of new ideas about thinking and learning. Good computerized tools can support people in this endeavor. And there again, like, people often have this idea that technology will help raise all the boats. I'm not good with idioms, but I think that's close to that. But it's really investing in people is what's going to raise all the boats. And I think my experience with working with families and communities, one of the things that I learned as a designer, and it seems like such an obvious lesson when I say it out loud, but it's that relationships really matter and that a lot of learning happens through those relationships. And often learning experiences are very individualized and thinking about individualized outcomes. But how do we think about investing in the relationships that people have with other people in their lives and kind of inviting them to participate in that experience too. So that's it for my presentation. Happy to keep talking. I also know I talked quite a while.
Well, Rick Rose knows that I'm a big fan of this work and think it's super interesting and inspiring and important. There was one mini question, and then hopefully some people will have some other questions that they want to ask. But when you quoted from Freire before, was that from Pedagogy of the Oppressed, or was that from another one of his writings?
It was another one of his writings. It was, did I put it? It was one from 2004. Is my screen still sharing? No.
No, we can see you now.
Yeah. I have it in my notes.
We'll get it later.
So we're looking at, yeah. I'll post it.
So Chris quotes you as saying relationships really matter. So what do you think that means for personalized learning in massive digital spaces?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's start with personalized learning. There's this great essay that Alfie Kohn wrote about personalized versus personal learning. And I'm really excited about what he says about personal learning, again, connecting to like someone's personal interests and their goals and thinking about how the experience or the computer mediated experience supports that versus kind of personalized learning that is trying to provide very explicit steps for someone to pursue based on the kinds of actions that they take. I might be overgeneralizing personalized learning. But I think I get really excited about technologies that connect people in the learning experience. A lot of the really peer-to-peer based learning opportunities.
Terrific. Let's see if folks have other questions. Good. Here, maybe one other question I have is sort of what do you, I mean, you're sort of in the midst of like wrapping up the presentation, trying to tell this story, but when you get 2 seconds to think about it, like what's the next level of this work for you? What are just interesting questions that you want to tackle that are based on this, or what do you think is the next step for this kind of work in your mind?
Yeah, often when I talk about next steps, I share a story from one of the kids in the workshop that really struck me. I was interviewing him and I asked him if he had still been using Scratch, and he said, no, I thought I would pick it up on the weekends, but I went back to my same routines. And I was like, okay, that's too bad, but okay, moving on to the interview. And when it was over, I asked if he had any questions for me. And the first question he asked was like, when's the next family workshop? And I was like, wait, you don't do Scratch at home, but you want to know when the next family workshop is. And I asked him to explain some more, and he said, in the workshops, like, you were there and the other facilitators and families are there, and I can share my ideas and get new ideas. And for him, the context was so important to him. And it's great that we designed this really valuable context that he wanted to continue participating in. But it made me think a lot about, again, what are the opportunities that surround a young person? And so I continue to think about how can we design programs or experiences or technologies or platforms that really connect the different people and places in a child's life. Family creative learning was a really interesting experiment in bringing families, community centers, and university students together. I'm really interested in exploring that space of how can we continue connecting across those contexts. One other line of thinking that I'm interested in is the role of documentation. We took a lot of documentation in the workshops for my research, but we also use it to share back with the families. Like, here are photos that we took, and we would make a really nice video for all the families at the end. And I've been thinking about how can we use documentation, not just a tool for us and as a nice thing to share, but also to help families reflect on their learning process and their experience. And, again, shifting the question from how can we assess learning to how can we document learning. And so that's one direction I'm also interested in.
That makes me think a lot of the Zero Making Learning Visible work that they've done so much on documentation, and about how making learning accessible to people helps stimulate their thinking. Awesome, Rick Rose. One other question here. Jordan asks, Rick Rose expressed some concern that resources at the governmental level of schools, whereas her research focuses on community centers. And I'm wondering what you think about sort of transitions or bridges between the two. I know that my home school district has a lot of nighttime classes for adults on the school grounds. How do you think between formal and informal spaces?
Yeah, definitely bridges. I am a fan of things that bridge across the settings, and there's some great programs that I think do that bridging really well. And thinking about family creative learning, I was really inspired by the Digital Youth Network, and that's something that they thought a lot about too, is like, how can we bridge or create bridges or design bridges that connect these spaces for kids' lives. And when you think about it, kids also have that responsibility of doing that bridging work and all that context switching across different people and places. And as much as the organizations could make that easier for kids too, I think that's great. Awesome.
Well, we're super grateful for your contributions to our class today. So I don't know, maybe we can all just type in the chat window a little clap or thank you or some other acknowledgement to Rick Rose, so that even from the silence, we can still hear acknowledgement of that contribution. So thank you so much. What we'll do for the next chunk of time is, let me try to, Rick Rose, what time is it where you are? I can't do this math in my head anymore.
It's 11:45 a.m.
It's 11:45 a.m. Okay, that's great. And it's 4:45 here, if anyone's curious. Let's do this. What I want to do is sort of transition us to going into some breakout rooms and having some smaller conversations around this. Let me tell you a little bit about how I see Rick Rose's work in context. And Rick Rose, we would be delighted to have you join us for any and all of this. And if you have to go back to writing your dissertation, we're also super grateful for the time you've shared already. So if you feel like you need to bid your farewells, either is totally great. We'd be delighted to have you, and totally understand if you need to shuffle along. Let me see if I can successfully share my screen here. Um, oh, it's asking for maybe more system preferences than I want to be able to offer. Present to everyone. Can you all see my screen? Let's see if I can see my screen. No, still sort of looks like you
I
for a
can see
minute.
your screen.
Okay, but let me see if can you all in the chat room, can you see my slides now? Is that working or no? Oh, yeah, all right, so that's working. Great, thank you, everyone. So here's how here's a few things I would do to situate Rick Rose's work. So the first thing that I would observe is that and this is sort of the argument that I make in that science paper, which is that broadly culturally we have this widespread assumption that when there's new technology innovation and that innovation is made available freely online, that it disproportionately benefits low SES folks because affluent people already have access to this kind of stuff and low SES people don't. That would be Khan Academy tells a story that when it releases free online SAT prep materials, that people who don't have tutors, can't pay for Kaplan and Princeton Review, will finally get access to these free resources. And that fact, is almost assuredly true. But what I've found in my research is I think what the Scratch team has found, what lots of other folks have found, which is that even when you make free online resources available, it tends to be that populations that already have access to financial, social, and technical capital are best equipped to take advantage of those free new innovations. That the people who are most likely to use Khan Academy SAT prep questions are people who are doing extra practice after their parents take them to Kaplan and Princeton Review, not necessarily the people who don't have access to SAT prep at all. And then the paper that you read last night in Science sort of demonstrates that these things that we see the same kind of patterns in MOOCs, that people who take MOOCs live in neighborhoods that are half standard deviation more affluent than typical Americans, that especially among young people, things like whether or not your mother or father has a bachelor's degree is a very strong predictor of whether or not you'll complete a course, especially for young folks, especially strongly for sort of learners in their kind of teens and early 20s. So to me, this is one of the cases that got me most thinking about this idea that across lots of different kinds of large-scale online learning environments that seem to be very different in a lot of ways. I mean, Khan Academy's SAT prep questions are very, very different from what Scratch is trying to do. But this paradox of free seems to be something that sort of cuts all across them. And I actually think there is a dearth of good ideas about how to resolve these challenges. I think we don't know super well what a series of design principles for digital equity would look like. I take my daughters to the Boys and Girls Club every Friday evening to go swimming. And I walk by these posters that have the Boys and Girls Club mission, which is to inspire and enable all young people, especially those who need us most, to realize their full potential as productive, responsible, and caring citizens. And I feel like with large-scale online learning, we are really struggling to figure out. It's not hard to figure out how we support lots of different people. It's really hard to figure out how do you target learning opportunities to those who need us most. So what I want to do for a couple of minutes is sort of propose 4 ideas about that, and then maybe we can break up into some discussion groups and talk about those ideas or talk about anything else that people want to chat about for a while. So here are 4 design principles. Here are 4 guidelines that I think might operate across lots of different settings that might help us think about addressing these issues. So the first is what Rick Rose's work in Tech Goes Home illustrates so beautifully, which is designing for the village, which I would summarize as if one of the challenges in designing for equity is that some students have more parental resources or different kinds of parental resources to draw upon than other students, then how do we create learning experiences that support whatever village surrounds kids? If we want to build the capacity of kids as computational creators, how do we think about building the capacity of their whole family as computational creators? That seems like a really promising design principle for digital equity. I think it's really connected to Griff's work with learning circles in libraries. How do we build networks around people? And those aren't scalable in the same way that a YouTube video is scalable. But the scale of community centers and the scale of boys and girls clubs is pretty remarkable. And there are resources in there to be tapped to expand these kinds of things, to have, I'm interested in the ways that the small, hyper-local, slow can enrich and unlock the potential of large-scale learning resources. Another that I'm really interested in, and I think we talked about this when we talked about XMOOCs, has to do with what are the kinds of psychological barriers that conceivably are making it difficult for people from non-dominant communities to participate fully, effectively in the ways that they want to in environments created by people from more dominant communities. So this, I think, is some work that I talked about when we were talking about MOOCs, which is this idea that with some colleagues, we've been demonstrating that there are very simple interventions that we can do at the beginning of courses. Things like asking people to write a letter to their future selves about what it feels like to belong, or to write a letter to a future student about why taking this course affirms their values. Really simple interventions that can actually close the participation gap, close the achievement gap, the completion gap between, in this case, we demonstrated across a number of MOOCs, a gap that we found between people who came from less developed countries as defined by the UN's Human Development Index, and more development from more developed countries as defined by the UN Human Development Index. The idea that there are sort of these negative feedback loops that folks can find themselves in, where they show up to a place and they're not sure they belong, and they see some trigger in the environment that makes them feel like they don't belong, and that makes them see more of those triggers, which makes them feel like they don't belong more, which makes them see more of those triggers, which makes them feel like they don't belong even more. And there may be kinds of things that we can do to help to address those negative feedback loops at the beginning of learning experiences. Another approach that I think is really hard to find great examples of, but the ones that are out there seem to be pretty powerful, are to try to find things that you can make open and free that are trivial costs to affluent folks, but are really serious cost barriers for low SES families. So the top project here is a picture from something called OpenStax, which is a project at Rice University. And what they observed is that across all of community colleges, or actually across all college enrollment in the United States, something like 40% of all college enrollments in any given semester are in about 20 classes. Nearly half of the people who are enrolled in a college class, this semester are enrolled in intro bio, algebra 1, US history, intro chemistry, microeconomics, macroeconomics, statistics. And the textbooks for these classes cost $140. And if you go to Vanderbilt or Harvard or MIT and you're from an affluent family, then that maybe is not such a big deal, or they've got other kinds of financial resources to support that. If you go to Bunker Hill Community College, that's just an enormous part of the costs of your education. So OpenStax has been working on taking these kinds of community college courses that are in state colleges, things like that, and getting philanthropists to make investments to make totally open, free, really high quality versions of these textbooks. There's another project that's called Desmos, which is committed to, and I might not have the .org and and those two might be wrong, but where they basically make it a free online graphing calculator. And again, a TI-85 for a family in Wellesley is not is an expense, but for lots of them is just one more cost of education. Whereas an $85 calculator can be a huge barrier to more affluent families. And so thinking about what kinds of things are sort of in the right kind of cost point where removing that as a barrier can really make a difference. And the last kind of strategy is sort of co-designing with learners. This is a picture from a project that was called the Glitch Game Testers, which was a project that was developed by Betsy DeSalvo, which is someone who Rick Rose, I think, cited along the way, where she she worked with a group of, she was interested in saying, how do we help young African-American men in Atlanta find pathways into college and into STEM and computer science majors and careers? And the way she did it was to build a little company called the Glitch Game Testers that was basically did Q&A work for quality assurance work for game companies. But from the very beginning, she didn't sort of lay all of that out at the beginning. She partnered with young men in the community from the very first days of her project to say, what are you interested in? What are the things that you care about? What would be some supports that would be useful to you? And then as they sort of developed this game company idea, they came up with the title of the Glitch Game Testers. She sort of waited long enough for them to propose that they offer an AP computer science class rather than having it come from her. It really kind of, there's lots more to discuss there, but a really nice story of trying to think about how do I support people by working really closely with the people that I'm trying to support, rather than saying, well, here's a solution I have, and sort of coming in and offering it. This is something that I know that Chris has a ton of expertise in with his work in participatory action design. Here's what I propose. Why don't we, Rick Rose, are you able to stick around to hang out in one of these groups?
I actually need to go at noon.
Okay. Well, then actually, let's ask you one last question, which is from Ankita, and then we'll break up into groups. The question is, are there challenges you face when you bring together parents whose idea of technology may be professional tools and social media, and kids who are more actively engaged with technology for invention? So with kids who have different expectations about what you should be able to do with technology, how do you think about sort of addressing that gap?
Between parents and kids' perceptions of technology?
Especially if parents' perception of technology is more sort of professional, social information gathering, and kids who may have more of an inclination about technology for invention. How do those things come up in your program?
Yeah, and they definitely come up. And one of the things we asked in the first workshop is like, what do people use it for? What do they think it's good for? What are they nervous about it with parents? And I think that's why I've been really excited to see the perspectives that families talk about after participating in the program. It's not so much replacing these ideas about technology, because it's true, they do use it for information seeking, and there are some harmful uses of technology, but to really expand those ideas of what the computer can be in their lives and in their children's lives, like that's what we want to for parents to take out of the experience, that this really more expanded view of it and what relationship that they can have with it together and with the technology.
Awesome. Thank you for hitting that last question so we get everything. All right. What we're going to do for the last chunk of class is that let's see, it is about noon now, so we've got about 25 more minutes. So, and I want to make sure we do these breakout rooms. So Catherine, we'll probably have you lead the discussion at the beginning of next class to help us think about our experience on Hangout. But I'm going to open up these rooms. If you see in the bottom left-hand corner, there are 4 breakout rooms there where I've sort of mentioned these 4 design themes that people could talk about. There's another one there, the 5th one, which again might be what Chris suggests, is sort of new design principles for digital equity. I've come up with 4, but maybe there are others that we should talk about. We could create an entirely separate room for eradicate inequality in non-digital spaces to enable equity in digital spaces. I'm totally happy to make up that. Maybe that's one invitation in the next kind of couple minutes. If there's any other room that people would like me to create with any other title, I'm totally happy to create that, and people can sort of come up with their own ideas, or they can go into these rooms and they can sort of undermine them. But why don't we do this for the next 20 minutes? I'm gonna, in a second, open up these rooms. People should jump into whatever room they want to. If one person can very, very quickly agree to be the facilitator for that room and just kind of help make sure that everybody has a voice in the conversation. And then if another person can create a Google Doc and to share the link to that Google Doc with everyone so you can sort of start taking notes together. And then we can have kind of some collaborative notes to share. But I'll give folks about 20 minutes to discuss in those small rooms. And then I will sort of summon you back here to this room. And we can have kind of a closing session. So you've got about 20 minutes now. Let me go ahead and open the sessions. When you click the join button, you're going to be vortexed into a little Google Hangout room that you can use to talk with other people. And I'll be able to sort of track where you are and send messages with so forth and so forth. So people should jump into the spaces that they're most interested in. If Catherine wants to, if anybody needs help, Catherine can jump in the chat. But go ahead and find yourselves in each of the rooms and take about 20 minutes to have a conversation there. And that was awesome, Rick Rose. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for you coming in and sharing your thinking.
Oh, that's great. It's always great to hear questions about it. And yeah, and if anybody has more questions, I'm happy to talk about them. Feel free to contact me.
Awesome. Have a great rest of the afternoon. Thank you, Rick Rose.
You too.
All right, so folks should be making their way into one of these 5 rooms. Some of you are successfully navigating over. Hopefully enough people are still around to be able to find each other here. Hi, everyone. Hopefully we get folks back. If one person from your group wants to come join me, you can click on the link to the Hangout on Air at the top there. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming back. It's nice to see you, even if I only see you through your typing and text. But good. Let me just make an invitation that if one person from each group wants to click on the link above, you could join me quickly in the Google Hangout to give a quick wrap up of what you were learning. Can each group please share their Google Doc here so we can read your notes? Oh, is this something that I typed? Awesome. How's it going, Jordan?
Hi. Wait, I don't know if I meant to be here.
No, you're perfect. This is exactly where I'd like you to be. Jordan, can you give us like 2 seconds on what kinds of things you were talking about in your small group?
Yeah, sure. So we were talking about social identity threats, and kind of like the survey approach that was used to kind of incorporate people, and we were proposing like a second alternative that would be sort of like orientation that's available for students that are starting college. So like before like a online learning community gets kicked off, you have like an opportunity to join like, I don't know, some subgroup and get to know those people at some level before joining the larger conversation before it gets started. So
Cool.
Recap.
That's great. That's a really good idea. So I had a student last semester who a survey of 20 different MOOCs from 20 different providers and investigated like what kind of sort of social induction they had in their classes. And something like 17 of 20 had absolutely nothing. And then 2 of them like barely mentioned some idea, and one of them actually did a good job. So, and it seems like what you're proposing might go sort of well beyond that, of being really intentional about, if it sounds like one way to take the evidence that beginnings matter is to really think about how do we include people, who we might expect to be really comfortable in distance learning, how do we include people for whom it would be a new experience. That sounds like a really productive set of ideas. Allison, what did you all talk about?
Sure. So we were the New Design Principles for Digital Equity group, which turned into a little bit of wanting to talk about participants having a say in what was actually happening. So content being focused on participants, both in regards to mentors in digital spaces. So how do we get people to focus on or have that kind of guiding person who's helping out with them, and then also talking about kind of designing for the village versus designing with the village, and how the difference of preposition there implies that we're including people in how we're building things and how we're designing things. So we had a lot of questions and did not come to a whole lot of final answers, but that was kind of our overarching conversation.
That's great. Yeah, I think thinking about some of those ideas about participatory design, thinking about the language that we use, thinking about sort of who has the power to impose these kinds of ideas on other people, who has responsibilities, all that kind of stuff seems super important. Well, thanks. We should definitely take some more time next week to get some feedback on this. So thank you all for doing this experiment with me. It's really fun to be able to play around with these new technologies with you. I'm a huge fan of Rika Rose's work, and I hope you found what she's doing inspiring. And I appreciate all your questions and participation and letting us stay on class from afar. And let's see if we'll continue the conversation we're going on. I think next week's readings and assignments and so forth are very straightforward. We'll think about assessment and assessment design and how we expand it and what some of the limitations are. We can do a little debrief of this. I'm happy to hang out here for a little while. If anybody wants to jump into the Hangout on there and just talk with me about whatever, any kind of office hour kinds of things, I can stick around for a little while as people need. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a fabulous week, a fabulous weekend. If you haven't sent me if you're enrolled in the class and you haven't sent me the assignments that are due, please do so soon. And otherwise, everybody have a great rest of the week. Thanks so much. Hey, Lee.
Hey, how's it going? All right. Yeah, so I was trying to get the known stuff to work in order to comment on some other people's known posts. Oh no, I'm getting echoes in the other one. Wait, let me mute the other video.
Or your head will explode.
All right. Yeah. Doesn't seem like it's been able to get it to work yet.
Hi, Michelle. Be sure you turn off your speakers on the other thing, or your head will explode. So you see my screen now?
Yes.
I've got this known thing here. Here's the community hub. So for long posts, you can click on the title, and then when I click on Justin Reich's known on the bookmarklet, it like the 3 bar, like I'm in my sort of new status update thing, and the 3 typical bars are here. But there's a new line here which is reply to a site. And then if I click publish, for people's status update, to reply to a status update, let's see if there's a status update here. It's a little trickier. Like this reply doesn't have like an obvious link, but strangely enough, the time is the time is the thing. So if I click on the known thing there, it lets me find that post.
Okay, let me see. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I was doing that, but.
Yeah. And then if you were successfully doing all those things, probably the next thing to do is to send a message to the known folks, either tweeting out to them or something like that. I don't know. You could screen share with me and show me what you're doing and seeing what gets stuck. Do you?
Yeah, let me do that. Okay.
Michelle, do you mind waiting for a minute? So it won't work in here. You'd go to
Right. I'm just trying to find
the one that you wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know. I admit the internet's not the only thing I'm having trouble with. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I wanted to reply to Jordan's post.
Yeah.
So here I should just be able to click this.
The bookmarklet.
and this is all I get.
Ah, okay. Is the bookmarklet in what browser are you using? Chrome?
Yeah,
All right.
I can just try with.
Firefox has I think Firefox has like a different thing. They have like a plugin or something like that. So you might have to install something different to make it work, which conceivably is a nuisance. Yeah, but as far as I can tell, you're doing this very simple thing completely correctly. So, there's nothing left to do. I don't think it should be associated. I don't think the fact that we're connected to each other should have anything to do with it.
Right.
Like, I think it's just a bug, but anyway, all right. I've done all I can, but I'm happy that if either you can submit a bug report or I can try to get in touch with Ben, who makes known, and see if we can get him to give us some feedback. So.
Yeah, I guess I'll submit something.
I mean, the other thing we could do, Jordan also has a Twitter account, so you could sort of you could write something up and then tweet it back to him, so he sees it. So that's at least a way of communicating.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's already there's like so many different things. It would be nice if I feel like the easiest way for a thread to actually get going is if it stays in the same thing. I don't know, but yeah, I could try another way too.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Michelle, how can I help you?
So I actually have a question about well, I guess it's related. And my question is about kind of aggregating content in general. And this sort of has to do mostly with the other course that I'm taking part in, because they have this learning management system that the course director has kind of set up, and it's not quite catching on. But at the same time, my question is for example, now say if you have this module on a particular topic and say a whole bunch of people write blog posts about it, in the absence of, say, known or something like that, how do you make those kinds of things easily searchable in a way that isn't sort of you constantly kind of doing stuff by hand? Because like on the one hand, you might have Twitter and then you'll have blog posts, and then maybe someone makes like a Pinterest board of resources they find useful, and then someone else does like a mentoring session for someone on Hangouts, and then there's like a link to that thing. And maybe this is not something that even really exists yet, but what tools do you usually use to sort of make it possible for people to kind of go in and make that, and sort of like go in and see what people have done and what they might kind of dip into? And what the course director has been doing in the past is they've been using Adobe Connect to record sessions, and then she'll upload those sessions to a group Dropbox. And this is sort of in addition to the learning management system that they have, where she tries to get, so that technically should work because it kind of looks like a Pinterest board, and you can upload all the stuff, and then there are chat groups and things like that. The only thing is it's not catching on. But even if it did, how do you make that kind of publicly available later? Like I guess my question is, how do you do something that's kind of learning management system looking like, pardon my English, but is kind of available publicly for like addition and curation and change?
Yeah. People have done some things like that with wikis, making public websites that are organized in certain kinds of ways. There's some learning management systems like Canvas that have a little bit more functionality for having some parts of the learning management system be public and some parts of the learning management system be more open. So that's another way of approaching things. I mean, definitely why learning management systems created by one instructor have become really popular is like that works, and it works on people's time schedule. all these other ideas, like they're more complicated. So they don't have as much technology around them. They're sort of like less technology that's going. It's harder. You know, so there's a kind of negative feedback loop there. You know, and so all of these, I think the things that we're doing are trying to experiment and figure out. I mean, this class does a good job. I think, I don't know that we're using all the technologies perfectly, but we're like relatively close to having a set of circumstances where all of our stuff shows up in one place, but certainly not in a curated or organized kind of way. You know, I do the email where I sort of grab everything that's getting done and send it to, you know, folks who are but yeah, I think there certainly are not like more. Well, there aren't a lot of more automated solutions. It would be interesting to. I mean, if you wanted to have a longer conversation about this, the person who I would talk to and who I bet would take the time to do it is this guy Alan Levine, who is
this the
you know, the
person
technical
who's been commenting on the?
Yeah, who jumps in periodically. I mean, the way to take the most advantage of it would be like, you know, write a little note which says, "Here's the challenges I'm working on," with like some links and some screenshots and things like that, and just say, you know, "Hey, Alan, you know, could I get 20 or 30 minutes of your time to show you the design challenge and to let you know how you might think about it?" He's probably done as much as anyone else to be able to solve it. I think, and a bunch of the people who feel like they're the most pure connectivists in the sort of Stephen Downes kind of tradition, I mean, there are a bunch of folks who would respond to you with something like, you might not be solving the right problem. It might be that like building people's capacity to search the network is the way to solve this problem rather than organizing the network for them. But you know, and sometimes I think, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing. That's a good idea. These people like, you know, person to fish, like, why not? And then sometimes I think, no, that's dumb. Like, we're supposed to help them, and like, happening. So I think there are, you know, depending upon who your students are and under what kinds of circumstances and what are your long-term goals for them, and how much the process of participating in the environment is actually the goal of the environment, would help you think about like the best way to answer those things.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was a question I hadn't even really thought about, like sort of as opposed to refining the network, refining sort of the capacity to kind of trawl through it.
Right. Yeah. You know, and one thing, I mean, I think you could make an argument in this course that I'm not sort of forcing you all, or I'm not as an instructor, like doing a ton of modeling of that. You know, there's a lot where I'm kind of trusting that you all have pretty high capacity to figure that stuff out on your own. And I sort of want you to struggle a bit on your own, but conceivably and we don't have a lot of time, but conceivably a better version of this course might have more time that was devoted to saying, hey, you know, hey, I can't just throw you all into this, like takes sort of more scaffolding and more skill building to be able to do that. Not unlike what Jordan was talking about before about, you know, that like the way we induct people into community really matters. So
cool. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's really nice to chat with you.
I will certainly reach out to Alan as well. I've been struggling a bit with my bibliography, which is why it has not made its way into you. But I will do that today. I think it's just that my sources feel so disparate in some ways. So I'm like, oh, but do I want to put it in or not? But I'm just going to like commit to the things that I have and
I think that's a wise thing. You can decide things don't work later.
Right.
But you know, for now, it's good. You know, the only way to get to good writing is through bad writing. The only way to get to good annotated bibliography is through bad annotated bibliography. So, I believe.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Michelle, have a great afternoon. Really nice to chat with you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.